BK. We invite you to join the Fun and Fellowship Committee on September 17th for an after-hours cookout at the club office. More information will be forthcoming, but just mark that on the calendar. The District Foundation Membership and Public Image Seminar is September 20th at Maine State College. All are encouraged to attend. You can ask Scott if you are interested in participating. And there is an opportunity to fish with your fellow Rotarians at Briarwood Sporting Club on September 26th at noon. The district conference is on October 10th, 11th, and 12th in Portsmouth. There will not be a spring conference this year. Thank you.
There are two committee meetings planned for today. One is Leadership Development and Vocational Service, chaired by Charlie Boatwood and Doug Gowdy. I think I saw both of them. Would you please stand up and be recognized? Yes, that's Doug and Charlie. Thank you. Rotary in the circle room, chaired by Tom Tallisi and Mark Funny. Tom, thank you. Bill Blaine Jr. will give the Dan Carmichael Memorial.
Rotary has lost another non-generic. A few months ago, it was John Mount. More recently, it has been Dan Carmichael. Dan was 95 years old when he died. He was the oldest living past president of our club, having served as president in 1960, 1961, when most of us haven't yet been Rotarians. And I might add that several of you probably weren't even born. Dan didn't like to be praised, but he was praised anyway, because he was a remarkable man in every sense of the word. During his college years at Princeton, 1937-41, Dan was the pitcher for the Princeton Tigers baseball team. In one game, he pitched 10 innings, scored the Tigers' winning run against Columbia Lions in the first televised sporting event in history. Incidentally, Dan also was captain of the basketball team, which was All-American for 2 years. During World War II, Dan flew an F-6F Hellcat off the aircraft carriers USS Hornet and the USS Enterprise. He saw action in the Battle of Midway. He shot down 13 Japanese Zeros and became an ace and retired as a Navy captain. During the war, there were several times when he almost bought the farm. But Dan was a survivor. After the war, Dan was a test pilot for North American Aviation in 1955 to 1958. While most of us are lucky to shoot 100 at jaw, Dan was the district amateur champion before the war in 1938, and again after the war in 1948. Among his other trophies, Dan was the Ohio amateur champion for 3 years and the Ohio senior champion for 2 years. Dan also found time to win the city senior handball championship. Where you and I might drive down the road at 35 miles an hour, Dan drove around a racetrack at around 200 miles an hour. He won several trophies, including the National Ford Cup and the SCCA President's Cup. Dan was the Formula Atlantic National Champion in 1995. During all those years of athletic achievements, some way or other, Dan found the time to pursue the profession of architecture. He had his own firm and designed hospitals and schools. In each case, or in each club or organization that he joined, which included a long list, its members recognized Dan's uniqueness and more often than not elected him as president or chairman of the board, which in our case as president of Rotary. Dan had the kind of charisma that made people want to know him and become his friends. He always used his many talents in a humble and modest manner. We'll miss Dan, and our club will be the lesser because of his death.
Personally, I knew Dan as a very unassuming man and very listener. Mark Lamont of Highway Paving will make an announcement about crawl, climb, and run spotlight. Oh, constant.
Hello, everyone. I wish I had better news for you, but I have a little bit of sad news, and that is that we, as a committee, just made the decision to cancel the event, to postpone it, because we only had literally a handful of people actually registered to participate. So that's too bad, but it happens. But today starts the planning for next year, because we will come back. We are Rotarians, and we persevere, and we learn from this event, and we will plan and take steps to make it successful next year. So, however, there is on October 11th, we are doing a joint event with Commit to be Fit. That will be October 11th, and our part of that will be more of a festival atmosphere. It's a free event. It's going to be quite a bit of activity going on. Channel 10 will be there. There'll be a walk. There'll be some obstacles, some small things for the children to do. And we will have a team challenge on the obstacle course itself. So we will be looking for teams and reaching out to community members, organizations, ROTC, and a number of others to actually participate in the team races. And so the only thing we'll ask from club members is a little bit of time to help volunteer and just kind of manage the obstacle course as they race. So that's it. Wish I had better news, but look forward to October 11th and come out and help us with that. Thank you.
I'm sure, as Mark Lamont said, that we will climb that figurative obstacle. I'd like to remind everybody that we are seeking members, and we would encourage every one of the members to ask at least one other member this year, and applications are available at the desk, and if you want, I can bring it to you and have them signed by your potential members. That being said, Teddy Dameron, Zara Fund of T. Dameron Consulting will create some fun.
Is the congressman here? Because I could go on for a while. Oh, yes. Should I keep going? All right. I'll make it quick. Just a few things to mention. First of all, we heard Evan from Rotary OSU. When's your first meeting start?
I believe it's a week from today, so it's
okay. So Rotary is starting back up. Great organization that we've had a fantastic and fun time to get going. Thanks for being here. Paul Blevins is here with a guest. Paul, tell us about your guest today.
Well, thank you, Teddy. Arena. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Arena Matsumoto. She is a member of Rotary's Next Generations Exchange, which is a vocational exchange for college-level students. She is a senior at Kobe's Women's University in Kobe, Japan, studying to be a teacher. And so through Tracy Nahara's efforts and some other Rotarians, she'll be visiting at Ohio State, Patel for Kids, and a number of other organizations visiting with schools to see how the American educational system works, as well as having some fun. She'll do a little trip to Washington, D.C. as well. So, thank you, everybody.
While I'm here, I'll turn it right over to Dwight. There's an upcoming event on the 26th.
The Woods and Water Committee is sponsoring an outing up at Briarwood. Now, I want to help you understand that it's not just about fly fishing. There are 7 lakes at Briarwood that are stocked with bass and bluegill and all sorts of other creatures that you can catch on a worm or on a fly. If you've never fly fished before, it's your chance to learn. One of our members, and I won't mention his name, please don't. One of our members started one of our first outings, probably 4 or 5 years ago. He never had a fly rod in his hand. He borrowed the equipment, and he came and he fished. He didn't catch anything. And then he came again and fished, and he didn't catch anything. So then he went to Mad River Outfitters up on Bethel Road. I do not get paid a commission for saying that. And he bought his equipment. And then he came to one of our outings. And he did not catch a fish. And then he came again. And he did not catch a fish. Finally, at our last outing, Callaway Robertson caught his first fish.
Good job, Callaway, finally. And speaking of catching their first fish, I also heard one of the prizes from the Derby Day soiree was fishing up at Briarwood. And one of our own members won that and went fishing on Saturday, caught close to a 3-pound trout. And it was his first time fishing. And so either it was beginner's luck, maybe he's better than Callaway, or it was Jackie Cooper's awesome instruction. Is this true?
Yeah, but the fish was 10 pounds.
That's the fish story. All right, one last thing. Let's see. Tomorrow evening, Cooking Channel. Tomorrow evening on the Cooking Channel, Man, Fire, Food, our very own Rotarian Jim Boudros will be on TV.
A Man, Fire, Food is a series on the Food Channel, and a good friend of mine in Kentucky is the star, and I'm just his sidekick.
Yeah.
8 o'clock on the Food Channel.
Thank you, Jim. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone.
Caleb Robertson will tell his fish story. No, sorry. Introduce Congressman Tiberi. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Dwight and Jackie. They've been fabulous to be hosts for us for many years, and it was 4 or 5 years, maybe it's been 6 years. But I learned something very valuable when I caught that first fish this spring. On photos, you put the fish way in front of you. It looks much larger than it really is. Thank you, President C.K. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker today, U.S. Congressman Pat Tiberi. The son of Italian immigrants, the oldest of 3 children, Pat and his sisters attended Columbus Public Schools, and he graduated from Northland High School. He is a graduate of The Ohio State University with a degree in journalism,
While in college, he worked various jobs to pay for his education and also marched in the OSU marching band. The best band in the land, right, Ben? Pat, whose last name is pronounced T. Berry, is a lifelong resident of the 12th Congressional District where he serves. Pat and his wife, Denise, have 4 daughters and live in Genoa Township, just north of Westerville. Following graduation from OSU, he worked as an aide to then Congressman John Kasich. Personally, my first home was 2 doors down from John Kasich, and I met Pat almost 30 years ago. He hasn't changed a bit. Pat served in the Ohio legislature and rose to the position of majority leader. Congressman T. Berry was elected to the U.S. Congress in 2000 and has served since 2001. He takes his responsibility to serve his constituents very seriously. Remarks from my good friend and fellow Columbus Rotarian, John Mariotti, who is traveling today. He's living proof that there are terrific, competent representatives doing their best for us in Congress. When I talk with him, I find him a highly approachable person who cares deeply about being responsible and fulfilling the duties entrusted to him by the voters who elected him. Pat will give us an update on Congress today, what legislation has passed in this time of great import, what is possible this fall, pre- and post-midterm elections, and in our next session of Congress. Please consider your questions of import to our district, Congress, country, and the world. Please turn off your cell phones. Please also ask a question, and please refrain from making long remarks so Pat can better take many questions. Please give a warm Columbus Rotary welcome, and please stand for our United States Congressman for the 12th District, Pat Berry.
Good afternoon. Stay away from that. All right. Stay away from that. Thank you for all you do as Rotarians. This is a great privilege. I will try to be brief. I've got a quick slideshow, and then I want to take questions, just so you have a bit of an idea of where I represent now, because some of you may not know, since it changes every once in a while. When I started in Congress in 2001, I had downtown, and including where we sit today. And then I went east and north and essentially split Franklin County with Deborah Price at the time. And then I also represented Delaware County and Western Lincoln County. That changed in 2003 after the redistricting, after the census. I lost downtown, and part of that reason, and a little bit of the north side, was because of the growth in the northern suburbs and eastern suburbs of Franklin County. And so Deborah then took part of the area, that Dave Hobson actually came in and took part of a little bit of Franklin County as well. And then in 2012, it changed again. Joyce Beatty now and represents part of the district I used to represent on the Near East side, some of the eastern suburbs, the north side where I grew up in the Northland area. I still have in Franklin County, Clintonville, North Campus, Dublin, Worthington, Westerville, most of New Albany, and part of North Columbus. And Steve Stivers represents essentially the western part of the county and the southern part of the county, western suburbs, Hilliard, Arlington, South Side, Grove City. And I also represent Delaware County still, as well as Morrow County to the north, part of Richland County up to Mansfield, a little bit of southern Marion and eastern Marion County, and now all of Licking County, as well as most of Muskingum County. So since I got pulled out of some of Franklin, the district that now represented by Joyce, very compact, I gained all that new area. So it gives you some sense of the district that I represent. So real quick, Washington update. Why, first slide, why is Congress so dysfunctional? You've probably been hearing a lot about that during our vacation here in August. So welcome to my summer vacation. My wife is still kind of struggling with that idea. So first question, why is Congress so dysfunctional? Next slide. You all probably can't see this. Ignore this. This is the margin of Senate control after the election. It's been pretty constant over the years. Blue signifies Democrat control. Red signifies Republican control. This top piece is the House. This is significant. It's easy to get things done when you have majorities, when you control majorities, whether you're a Republican or Democrat in charge, when you have big-time majorities. And look at some of the majorities that Speaker Tip O'Neill had, Speaker Jim Wright had, Tom Foley had. In 1964, 155 more Democrats than Republicans. Easy to be bipartisan because there just aren't many Republicans. Newt Gingrich took over, he had a 26-seat majority. That was pretty historic. Not that he just took over, but the Republicans had 26 more seats. When I arrived after the 2000 election, we had 9 more Republicans than Democrats. 9. People often say Democrats are a coalition party. So are Republicans. I tell you, we have at least 9 libertarians that say they're Republicans, but they're really not Republicans, they're libertarians. And so the leadership has to deal with not only the slight majority and what brings a slight majority, but the minority always thinks, geez, if we just win a few seats, we can become the majority. So right now we have a 23-seat majority. A 23-seat majority. Even when Democrats barely passed the Affordable Care Act, which was pretty controversial at the time, Nancy Pelosi had a 79-seat majority. 79 seat. That's one of the reasons that it's so much more difficult today than the good old days of the 60s, 70s, and 80s when majorities were not even close. Next slide. This just gives you a sense of where we are today. House has passed 511 bills. Senate's passed 232. Out of the very low, historically, number of bills that have been signed by the president, 108 have started in the House, 37 have started in the Senate. Of the appropriations bills this year, out of 12, House has passed 7, Senate 0. Amendments adopted on the House floor and Senate floor, and by the way, these are both Democrat and Republican amendments adopted in the House, 215, 0 in the Senate. On the Senate floor this year, 19 amendments have been allowed to be offered. 19 amendments have allowed to be offered. A majority of those Democrats. We have members of the House, including Democrats, who've offered more amendments in a week than have been allowed to be offered in the Senate in the last year and a half. So the Senate, I think the more appropriate thing is the Senate's a do-nothing Senate. That could change next year. Next slide. We have at least 43 jobs bills stuck in the Senate, including a bill that I have, small business tax relief, that's immediate expensing. But there's a whole number of them. Why moving jobs bills? Why is that so important? Next slide. I'll take you back to when the stimulus bill was passed. The administration said if we pass this bill, and they did pass it, it was mostly partisan, this is what would happen. This is their number on unemployment. So this is the U.S. Labor Department's official unemployment. As you see, the economy still struggled after the stimulus bill and has still kind of struggled along. It has come down, thank goodness. And then you have the issue of invisible unemployment, those people who have stopped looking for work. That's why we need a jobs plan. We have none. Next slide. I show this all the time. This is the ticking time bomb. The Dispatch has correctly editorialized about this now for years. This is the problem with respect to the federal budget and our structural debt that we have to get our arms around. This side is all the mandatory spending. This side is the discretionary spending. This is what Congress deals with on a year in and out basis. This is autopilot spending. The autopilot spending is the things we don't deal with on a year-to-year basis. A new mandatory program is Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. The largest programs today are Social Security and Medicare. They are very big and getting bigger. We have 10,000 baby boomers signing up for Medicare every single day. 10,000, and that continues for years to come because of the baby boomers. This slide was flipped when John F. Kennedy took the oath of office in 1961, meaning this was the mandatory and this was the discretionary. So mandatory is crowding out discretionary. It continues to grow. Next slide. So another way of looking at it, autopilot spending versus all other spending. Autopilot spending in 1970, 42%. It's now 65, 64 in 2012. This is where it's projected to go. Crowds everything else out. Next slide. Nobody's fault, really. If you look at where we are, in 1950 we had 16.5 workers for every retiree. Now we have less than 3 workers for every retiree. And every one of those retirees, by the way, most of them are living longer. Life expectancy, 68 in 1950. Now we're hitting 80. We have more people living into their 90s. As you eulogized one of your members who lived into his 90s, it's becoming more common. People are beginning to live longer in retirement than they were in the workforce. The system was never designed to do that. The Dispatch had a great article a week ago today about the differences between Republicans and Democrats on how to solve this. We have a Democrat proposal to increase benefits by lifting the cap. That extends the life of Social Security by 3 years. 3 years. So today, we have more money going out to pay benefits than we have coming in from workers, because we have fewer workers that pays the tax, the Social Security tax. Medicare is even worse. And so, the reason why some of you in the room continue to get your Social Security like you're supposed to is because all that money that was borrowed in the past is being repaid with interest. And by the way, today that's projected to run out at the beginning of the 2030s. That's less than 20 years away. That we will then have a crisis, because according to Social Security, the only thing they can do is one thing: cut the benefit. And that will be about 70% of the benefit that you're expecting. So you get 100% today, you get 70% if we do nothing. And there are only a few things that we can do. It's not rocket science. Unfortunately, it's a lot easier to promise more benefits or increase benefits than to actually tell the American people the truth, which is what I'm trying to do here today, and what we're trying to do in Washington to come up with a compromise to fix this system, Social Security, for future generations. Future generations meaning some of us in the room. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. IRS scandal is something under our jurisdiction. The Obamacare is partly under our jurisdiction. So let me just give you a quick and dirty, because I get this question a lot. What's going on with the IRS scandal? I won't go through all the timeline here, but essentially we started this process by the Ways and Means Committee sending a letter over 2 years ago, 3 years ago actually, in June of 2011, because we had heard of the IRS hassling some individuals, taxpayers, and it became a theme in districts around the country with respect to tax-exempt organizations on the right. As it turns out, 10 days after we sent that letter, we just found this out this year, Lois Lerner, who's at the center of this investigation, she had her hard drive crash, and they have since destroyed that hard drive, or they say they have. So 2 years after that, she admits to the IRS targeting by emails that we have received. She has since resigned. We found out this year that the IRS says they lost all these emails, and we have retrieved some of them through the recipients in other agencies. One of those was an email that Lois Lerner sent to the Treasury Department, essentially saying that we, the IRS, should investigate Chuck Grassley, who was the ranking Republican on the Finance Committee that has jurisdiction over the IRS, because he was invited to a tax-exempt Republican conservative organization, and she thought it was inappropriate. That email came out not because of the request that we had from the IRS, but from another agency, from an investigation by the Inspector General. Next slide. Essentially, we passed a criminal referral to the Department of Justice because we don't have the ability to take that action. The Justice Department hasn't done a thing with it, unfortunately, but we believe that there's evidence there to cause for a criminal referral, but so far they have not done a thing based upon our letter with this information, exposing confidential taxpayer information through her personal email, impeded investigations by providing misleading statements, and denied rights to the due process and equal protection to some conservative groups. Next slide. Next step, the investigation continues. We're interviewing all the IRS employees. who have potentially touched learners' hard drive or came into contact with her. We're reviewing documents from all those agencies. That's how we found the Grassley email. And we're also working with outside computer forensic experts who believe that there is a way to recover some of the missing emails, even though the IRS says there is not. So what you can do is ask for a special counsel to be appointed. Again, we've asked for that, but nothing has been done. Next slide. Monetary consequences. We're hearing more and more about some of this. Next slide. So as we continue to debate issues with respect to this, we have seen a number of studies that talk about, unfortunately, premiums going up, not everywhere, but premiums going up. We've also seen small market groups experiencing premiums. The 30-hour rule alone has caused, even with public employers, a reduction in the number of people who are working at certain institutions, including colleges. And so that's, again, a part of the process of what this unfolding of the bill, which is not fully implemented yet, we continue to see. Next slide. This is one that we hear more and more, we've heard more and more about this year. Now remember, the President's delayed a number of provisions unilaterally, which we believe is a problem, acting without the jurisdiction to do that, which, by the way, last week we had a General Accounting Office report, independent arm of the Congress, issue a statement that the prisoner swap between the administration with 5 al-Qaeda prisoners at Guantanamo Bay for Sergeant Bergdahl, the American who was held by al-Qaeda, was illegal because the administration broke the law by not consulting Congress, as the law requires. Well, that goes along with this issue of the President stopping, delaying parts of the mandates and regulations. One of the things that went into effect was this issue of networks in the exchange. What's happening is people are losing access to doctors and hospitals. So in my congressional district, in Marion, Licking, and Richland County, for instance, each of those communities have one hospital, but most of the plans on the exchange, you aren't permitted to go to the hospital in the county that you live in. And so people are finding that out afterwards. And unfortunately, the most expensive plans in all those counties that include their local hospital is the most expensive plan. What people tend to do is purchase the least expensive plan, so they have to drive to Columbus from Mansfield, or Columbus from Newark, or even worse, in Zanesville and Muskingum County, they have to drive to Columbus to have hospitalization. Next slide. So the Congressional Budget Office has recently acknowledged they can no longer estimate the impact because of the arbitrary delays and exemptions. And even the Health and Human Services Inspector General has expressed concern that because of the subsidies in the bill, that taxpayers who are not supposed to be getting credits are getting credits, and vice versa, which up to 2.6 million inconsistencies. That's a ton. So we're continuing to try to work with the administration and then try to actually challenge the administration. Some of my colleagues are telling people we can repeal Obamacare if we take the Senate. We can't. We can try to continue to put pressure on the president, but at the end of the day, we don't have anywhere near the votes in the Senate to repeal Obamacare. We have to have a dialogue with the president, compromise with the president, because nothing's going to change as long as he's president. He's not going to sign a bill to repeal Obamacare. You need 67 votes to repeal Obamacare after a veto, a sure veto by the president. Next slide. Last slide. We could spend the whole time just talking about this. The world is collapsing around us, whether it's in Eastern Europe, in Central Asia, the South China Sea, Africa, Middle East. You've got so many complexities in the Middle East. But I will bring up one today, and that is, if you've watched the news lately, ISIS. ISIS is a break-off organization from Al-Qaeda. Thought Al-Qaeda was too moderate. They now control a nation-state, essentially, that encompasses about half of Iraq, as well as eastern and northern part of Syria. They are lethal. They are extremist. They have money, they have weapons, and they hate the West. They hate Christians, they hate Jews, they even hate Muslims who don't practice their sort of extremism. They are a direct threat to the United States and to Western culture. They have, unfortunately, recruited Western Europeans and Americans who are fighting alongside of them. And the concern, obviously, that our intelligence forces have is that that means at some point in time, someday, somebody with a Western European passport, a Canadian passport, an American passport, doesn't need a visa to come to the United States. They can come with that passport. They can enter a port in New York or Miami or wherever else, and they can then plan to do something here. Their goal is to blow up an American city. That's their goal. I don't know that they're capable of doing that today, but the president has been pretty inconsistent on having a plan to deal with ISIS in this region. And so part of the problem is when you lead from behind, you're not leading. And the vacuum that's been unfortunately filled in this region of the world is a pretty bad one. In the Ukraine, obviously, the vacuum has been filled by Putin, who's a thug and a czar, essentially, trying to reconstitute what was the USSR. Europeans are scared, but at the end of the day, the Europeans aren't going to do anything. Why? Because they are dependent on Russia for energy. And Russia is flexing their muscles. So we have to provide some sort of humanitarian, at least, and intelligence to the Ukrainians, and commitment to our allies in Western Europe that we will help them with respect to energy. So they have at least some sort of spawn to stand up to the Ukrainians. Those of our allies in Eastern Europe are also scared to death of what Putin is doing. So that is a quick overview. But most importantly, I'd like to challenge you to some questions you might have for me. Yes, sir.
Within the last year or so, it appears that the heads of both the CIA and the NSA have lied to Congress.
Yeah.
What, if anything, should be done about that?
Well, it is. I don't sit on the Intelligence Committee or the Homeland Security Committee, but I can tell you that the Democrat and Republican members of that committee are pretty frustrated with the relationship. As you might know, to go even further, the Senate now has admitted, or excuse me, the CIA has admitted that they actually spied on the Senate, both Democrats and Republican staffers, through computers that they initially denied, and the head of the CIA denied, and now obviously it's all come out. Those people should be fired, quite frankly. The Intelligence Committee works a little differently than the rest of the committees of Congress because of the work that they do, and so some of the hearings they have are not public, and quite frankly, even I don't know. The members of Congress have different security clearances, and while I have one, it's not to the level that the President, the Speaker of the House, the Chairman of the Intelligence Committees, and the ranking members have. And so they're dealing with some of these issues internally at the committee level and the leadership level, but it clearly has set back relationships with those intelligence agencies, which historically have been pretty nonpartisan and pretty objective, at least with their relationship with Congress. And right now, the lack of leadership there is stunning. But at the end of the day, the president has the ability to stand by those folks, and thus far he has. And there's little that Congress can do to make the director go away, other than expressing their non-support for it. But those other employees are going to be fired. It clearly, according to the Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers, who's a friend of mine in the House, he doesn't believe that the head of the CIA knew about the spying incident. But Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat from California, who also doesn't believe that the head of the CIA knew, is pretty upset about it. It crosses a huge line. Back and back.
In light of the ISIS problem, what is your view as to what our administration should be doing?
Well, providing leadership is one issue. I'll take you back a year ago, and you might remember this. A year ago in Syria, the president said we need to have airstrikes. Well, we, the Congress, said, well, who are we striking? we all agree that the head of Syria is bad. The leader of their government is bad. He's had clearly blood on his hands and mass killings. He's a dictator. So are we trying to take him out? Or are we supporting the rebels? And by the way, the rebels, they weren't one form of rebels. You had moderate forces, and you had these extremists, ISIS, right? And so are we aiding them? It was very, very complicated. And the president provided zero leadership in explaining that to the American people. The Americans were overwhelmingly opposed to it. Congress was opposed to it because we were asking the questions. So what are airstrikes going to do? Are they going to help the dictator who's got blood on his hands? Or are they going to help this radical group get into power and have more power? Or are we going to help this moderate faction who's trying to have more freedom and more liberty in a country that is run by a dictator? And there wasn't an answer to that question. Congress never passed a resolution. Over time, the moderate forces have kind of gotten smaller. The rebel extremists have gotten bigger. You know now, if you watch TV, that now they aren't only a threat to Syria, but they're a threat to Iraq. They control much of Iraq and Syria, but they're much worse than just that. So the president has never outlined to us why this is a national security issue. I believe it is a national security issue. I think more and more Americans will realize that when the facts come out. But why hasn't the president, my question is, why hasn't the president done this? Nobody in Congress is saying there should be boots on the ground. Nobody. We are a war-weary nation. We're not there. And I don't think we need to be there, by the way. I think there are other things we can do. And one of those things we need to do, and this is the problem with the president, is he is leading by looking at polls. But most Americans don't know. 6 months ago, nobody in this room probably knew what ISIS was. And so Americans don't know what the threat is. If they knew what the threat was, and knew what the facts were, they'd be more accepting of a plan. We don't even know a plan. The president, if you look at the Wall Street Journal today, is thinking about doing more with respect to airstrikes and maybe special forces. I think that makes sense, but what are special forces going to do? What is their objective? Is their objective to contain? I don't think containment of ISIS is a good thing. I think it needs to be broader than that. And by the way, you have others in the region, as well as in Europe, who want to be helpful in this as well. But nobody's providing any leadership. Arguably, the UK is providing more leadership than we are. And so I think more needs to be done, more intelligence in terms of what we're up against and what the moderate forces are capable of doing. We've seen on the evening news what the Kurds have been able to do with limited airstrikes from us. We've really not provided much more than that. We haven't provided intelligence. We haven't provided any sort of arms to the Kurds. And they've done a good job of maintaining the status quo and fighting back. But they haven't gained any grounds, so to speak. But also in Syria, you have moderate forces there that are fighting the government, but also fighting these extremists with no help from anybody on the outside other than humanitarian help. So it's not a single shot, this is what we do, and it's all solved. We're not going to solve this problem. This is really complicated, but what we need to do is figure out how to, with the rest of the world, destroy ISIS before they create more havoc around the world. That's the issue. And I don't even bring up, by the way, the other problem in Israel and Gaza, and by the way, in Libya just this weekend, the extremist force there took the airport. It's the whole area is just blowing up before our eyes. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Congressman, there are at least 3 ESOP companies here today, and I know you're a loyal customer of another great ESOP company. Can you tell us?
Is he here? Is Jeff here? All right.
Can you tell us the congressional prospects for ESOPs, good and bad, in the current Congress?
Well, good, Tim. I mean, really good. The problem is we need to do tax reform. We need to do. How many of you heard about Burger King this morning? Anybody hear about that? A lot of you heard about Burger King this morning. This is a symptom of a problem that we have to deal with in a bipartisan way. So the president would say today, if what he has said in the past, if he believes what he said a couple weeks ago, he would say Burger King is being unpatriotic by acquiring another company and moving their headquarters potentially to Canada. Well, what happens is capital is fluid. And what's happening around the world is you have governments around the world, our competitors, lowering their corporate statutory tax rate. Canada's done that over the last 8 years. They have a 15% corporate tax rate. So we need to do that before we continue to lose more jobs. Once we do comprehensive tax reform, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Again, no presidential leadership. What I would like to see us do, Tim, is expand employee stock ownership. I think ESOPs have been a great model. Unfortunately, the rest of the country, it's regionalized, as you know. So the Midwest, we have a lot of them. We have a lot of ESOPs, which are good for employees, they're good for communities. And at the end of the day, I think it's good for America if we expand the ability to do ESOPs. But when you have regions of the country that look at you, ESOP, what in the world is that? You have members of Congress who've never had anybody in their district talk to them about ESOPs. That's the challenge of expanding ESOPs. But it's a great benefit for a lot of communities and a lot of employees. Hopefully we can expand. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, like in the case of the IRS fiasco, it seems like that no one ever calls in experts to analyze the situation. I have grandkids that could recover from a drive crash.
Yeah.
And everyone, and all my grandkids also know that emails don't reside on your own computer.
Right.
So when all this stuff comes out to the public,
Right.
you look like you don't know which end is up.
Absolutely right.
So why is it that you don't call in the experts?
We have. So, as I told you earlier, the IRS has told us that, I mean, think about this. This is just criminal. So we've had 4 different either IRS directors or interim directors over the last several years. And so it's just been a train wreck in trying to get anything from these new directors. Each director comes in and says, I just found this out and I'm trying to deal with it. But at some point in time, the IRS took her computer, took the hard drive. They already knew that we had concerns about our emails. We had hearings on it. We've had letters on it. And what do the IRS officials do? They destroy. They don't put it aside. They don't keep it. They destroy her hard drive. They destroy her computers. And they say, there's no way now we can recover this. So we have contracted with private sector firms, Silicon Valley firms, to try to reconstruct these. The difficulty is we're talking about literally hundreds of thousands of emails. Because it's just not her. It's like 5 IRS employees. Hundreds of, and theirs crashed as well, conveniently. And so this has been a very slow, painstaking process for a society, and me included, who have a fast food mentality, right? If you want a cup of iced coffee and a Big Mac, you can get one in 30 seconds. Well, justice is slow to start with, and when you have a bureaucracy that not only puts up legal hurdles, but also slow walks everything is delayed. Truth ultimately going to come out, and we have those computer forensic experts now that we are paying to undo, not just by the way of her hard drive, but here's the other point of it, how we got Grassley's email, is that there are interagency communications. And so we are backtracking through the experts we've hired through other agencies to reconstruct many of her emails. It's just slow. It's very, very slow. Yes, sir?
I think the last question and your answer about the truth eventually coming out, I think illustrate a constant problem we seem to be having, which is no matter what the topic,
right,
whether it was Benghazi, whether it was Lois Lerner, the IRS, the problems in the Affordable Health Care Plan named by Mr. Orwell, the press seems to report Republicans in Congress throw mud at the administration with false charges, smearing this, claiming that, charging this.
Great point.
But do not seem to report, they make the story, the Republicans are, for partisan advantage, attempting to smear the administration rather than reporting the facts and letting the readers make up their own mind. What can be done to better communicate the message to the press so that the fourth estate does its job?
Boy, that has been a big frustration. How many of you saw on TV the General Accounting Office report this last week? Anybody see it on national TV? Big deal. General Accounting Office. Now, if I were a reporter, this isn't the Obama press office. This isn't Boehner's press office. It's not Harry Reid's press office. It's not Ted Cruz's press office. The General Accounting Office released a scathing report saying that the White House and the administration acted unconstitutionally by not giving the leaders of Congress the 30-day requirement before the issue of the release of those 5 detainees in exchange for Bergdahl. That should be like top of the full New York Times. It should be the lead story on the news, on all the, and it wasn't. It wasn't there. It's outrageous. And unfortunately, what's frustrating for us is those of us who want to fix things is some of our allies on the right do the same exact thing. And sometimes they ignore the facts and get you all stirred up where you shouldn't be stirred up. And so then you have this, you have this. The president does enough, I think, to warrant us from calling him out on what he does. We don't need radio talk show hosts to say what he's not doing that go over the line. To my point, to your point. If we just stuck with the facts, the fiscal cliff deal on January 1st of 2013, can you imagine Tip O'Neill, great Speaker of the House Democrat, and Ronald Reagan, either one of them doing this? This is the deal that came together because Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell put together at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, because all these Bush tax cuts were expiring. Sequester was about to take place. It ended up being delayed a little bit, where we preserved 99% of the Bush tax cuts. Well, the president puts out a statement that morning on January 1st, before the House even reads the bill that day. We're meeting at 9 o'clock. The White House puts out a statement titled, "We Won." Imagine that. And it was on Fox. It was on CSNBC. So while all you guys are enjoying January 1st and the football games and the food, we were in the Capitol basement, first kind of going through the bill, and then getting all these press reports that Obama says he won, before even the vote took place in the House. Now, I still voted for it, but another of my colleagues said, what kind of president, what kind of leader is this? Well, that was covered. That was covered, but nobody ever called him out, saying, that's the lack of leadership. Well, it happened the last week we were there. The same thing happened the last week we were there, if you watch TV. The president has a press conference on July 31st, calling the House home, because we didn't pass this border security bill dealing with the humanitarian crisis, going to $3.7 billion. Our appropriators said, that's crazy. You need less than $1 billion to deal with this in a humanitarian way. Where's all this other stuff coming from? The Senate couldn't vote on it. They went home. They already left. Now, if you watch his press conference, you wouldn't know that, because he focused his attention on House Republicans. And so, part of what we get and deserve, we can blame ourselves for. But part of it is this president just drives a stake through us every day. And he did it again that day. 36 hours later, we finally went home, but we had actually passed the bill. But if you watch the national news, you'd have thought the House Republicans didn't do anything. I was watching an interview that Bob Schieffer did on Sunday, that weekend. Senator John Thune was on there. And he said to Senator Thune, how come Republicans can't get their act together? You all left without going on vacation. You left on vacation without getting anything done. Thank goodness John Thune said, well, wait a second, Bob. The House Republicans did pass a bill. We didn't. I mean, talk about malpractice in journalism. It's awful. It happens all the time. But thankfully, you had a senator there who was willing to, nicely correct the facts. But it happens every single day. And so it's really, really hard. Really, really hard. Because you can have a press conference every day, And if the press ain't going to cover it or not report on it all, you're at their mercy. Now, the good thing is social media and technology. That's all great if it's done right. Because the bad thing about technology and social media is the misinformation. And then people say to me, well, how come Congress doesn't pay into Social Security? Well, we have since 1984. I was in college when that changed. Well, I read it on the internet. It has to be true. Well, no, it doesn't have to be true. So that's the other part of it. People have to be more vigilant about making sure they get the right information, checking their sources. Great question. Really great question. I'm getting the hook. Thank you so much.